Welcome to Story Time, where real stories unfold. Stories that shock, stories that inspire, and stories that stay with you long after they're told. If you enjoy real stories, make sure you subscribe, follow, and like. New stories drop 3 times a week. Now, let's get into today's story.
She was sitting
Welcome
at
to
work in the
Story
middle of an
Time.
ordinary day, at her desk, clocking in, doing the same kind of work she had probably done 100 times before. And then her ex-boyfriend walked through an unlocked door, armed. Within minutes, one woman was dead, another was fighting for her life, and an entire workplace would be left replaying the same question over and over again. How does somebody go from being part of your life to becoming the person who destroys it? Stay locked in, because this case out of Bradenton, Florida is one of those stories that starts off looking like a breakup that went bad and ends with something far darker. Today we're talking about the murder of Myshala Burnham, a 29-year-old mother and healthcare worker whose life was taken in a place where she should have been safe, her job. And what makes this story hit even harder is that this was not some random stranger attack. This was somebody who knew her, somebody who had once been close to her, somebody who, according to police, could not accept that the relationship was over. And before we get into it, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you want more real stories told the way they deserve to be told. Now let's get into it. Myshala Renee Burnham was 29 years old. She lived and worked in Bradenton, Florida, and by all accounts, she was the kind of person people naturally gravitated toward. She worked as a phlebotomist at a medical lab. Steady work, important work, the kind of work that keeps everything moving quietly in the background without most people ever stopping to think about it. She was also a mother, and for the people who knew her, that was a huge part of who she was. Her 6-year-old son was at the center of her world. That wasn't just something people say after tragedy. That was how she lived. She was trying to build stability, trying to keep moving forward, trying to make a life. And that matters, because when people get reduced to headlines, you lose the real person. Myshala was not just a victim in a workplace shooting. She was a mother, a friend, a daughter, a woman with a life that was still unfolding. But somewhere behind that life was a relationship that had already started turning into something unhealthy. Keith Roberts Jr. was also 29 years old. He worked as an armed security guard at Manatee Memorial Hospital, a job that comes with a certain image: control, responsibility, composure. The expectation that when things go wrong, you're supposed to help make them safer. He and Myshala had reportedly been in a long-term relationship, and from the outside, it may have looked normal for a while. That's the thing about a lot of toxic relationships. From the outside, people don't always see the cracks until everything collapses. By late 2025, Myshala had decided she was done. She ended the relationship and stepped away. But according to investigators and later reporting, Keith did not take that well. He kept reaching out. He kept trying to stay connected. And Myshala, like so many people trying to exit a relationship without making things worse, reportedly tried to handle it gently. She tried to give him space to talk, tried to let him process it, tried to end things without escalating them. But sometimes the person on the other side is not looking for closure. They're looking for control. And once Keith realized the breakup was real, something darker seems to have set in. On January 15th, 2026, Myshala went to work like it was any normal day. That detail always hits me in these cases, because the people in these stories never know they're walking into the last normal hours of their lives. She arrived at the medical lab on the 5200 block of 4th Avenue Circle East in Bradenton and started her shift. Sitting near her was her coworker, Summer Freitag, 26 years old, a licensed practical nurse seated at an adjoining desk. Everything about the day appeared normal, until just before 1 p.m. At around 12:48 p.m., police say Keith Roberts Jr. entered through an unlocked door, not forcing his way in, not creating some loud, dramatic scene first, just walking in. And because of their history, police say he knew exactly where she would be. He knew the building. He knew the setup. He knew her routine, which makes what happened next feel even more deliberate. He went directly to where Myshala was seated, and then he opened fire. In a matter of seconds, a regular workday became a crime scene. Multiple rounds were fired toward Myshala at point-blank range, and Summer Freitag, sitting right there beside her, became the second victim of a violent act that had nothing to do with her except that she was close enough to witness it. According to reports, after shooting Myshala, Keith turned and fired toward Summer too. Imagine that room for a second. 2 desks, a workday in progress, people doing their jobs, and then sudden gunfire so close that there is almost no time to process what's happening. Myshala did not survive. She died there at her desk. And then, just as quickly as he came in, Keith walked back out of the building, got in his car, and left. That part is chilling to me, because it shows how fast lives can be shattered. One person walks in with intent, and in minutes a mother is gone. A co-worker is critically injured, and every person in that building is left traumatized. Inside the lab, panic took over. People screamed, people called 911, people tried to understand what they had just seen. And next door, workers in a nearby dental office had heard the shots. But in the middle of all that chaos, witnesses did something that turned out to be crucial. They got his license plate. Those witnesses became a major reason this story didn't keep unfolding into something even worse. Police were given the vehicle description, the plate information, and the direction Keith was traveling. Calls started flooding in before 1 p.m., and law enforcement quickly moved to find him. Around 1:12 p.m., deputies in Manatee County spotted his vehicle near the Bradenton Area Convention Center in Palmetto and pulled him over. So think about that timeline. He allegedly walks into the lab at around 12:48 p.m., and by about 1:12 p.m., he's already in custody. That is an incredibly short window. And according to authorities, when officers approached him, he made statements showing he knew exactly why they were there. Meanwhile, Summer Freitag was rushed to Blake Hospital, and what she survived is honestly hard to wrap your head around. She had been shot multiple times. Reports say in both arms, the leg, and the chest. One injury reportedly severed her brachial artery. Her knee was shattered, along with bones in her leg. Her family later described her as a miracle, and honestly, that's not an exaggeration. By all accounts, she came terrifyingly close to dying. When Bradenton police spoke publicly, they did not soften their words. The police chief reportedly described Keith as cruel and evil. And that kind of language stands out because law enforcement usually tries to keep things measured in public. But in this case, the brutality of what happened, the closeness of it, the setting, the sheer terror it caused, made officials speak in unusually direct terms. Investigators later said Keith told them he hurt Myshala because he could not stand the thought of her being with anyone else. That statement says everything. Not love, not heartbreak, possession. That mindset, the idea that if a person leaves you, you get to punish them for having a life beyond you, is exactly what turns rejection into violence. And it's also why cases like this hit such a nerve. Because so many people know what it feels like to leave a relationship and hope the other person just lets go. But sometimes they don't. And sometimes the consequences are irreversible. Keith Roberts Jr. was charged with first-degree murder in connection with Myshala's death, along with attempted first-degree murder for the shooting of Summer Freitag. When he made his first court appearance on January 16th, the judge ordered him held without bond, calling him both a danger to the public and a flight risk. A no-contact order was also put in place. The violence didn't end when the shooting stopped, because cases like this keep hurting people long after the arrest. Summer faced a long recovery, surgeries, physical therapy, learning how to move forward after something no one should ever have to survive. Her family spoke publicly about just how close they came to losing her. One moment she was at work, and the next, Her loved ones were getting the kind of phone call that changes your life forever. And then there was Myshala's family. That kind of grief is hard to even describe. A woman named Brianna Fisher, who was very close to Myshala, wrote publicly about what this loss meant. She described Myshala not just as a friend, but as part of her life in a way that went far beyond words. She talked about their memories, their milestones, the way they had grown up through life together. And one of the most painful details was that Brianna had spoken to Myshala right around the time the shooting happened. Imagine that, talking to someone, and then learning that within minutes they were gone. At first, Brianna reportedly thought it had to be some kind of random mass shooting. She didn't immediately think of the ex-boyfriend. And that detail says a lot too, because sometimes even the people close to a situation don't fully see how dangerous someone has become until it's too late. Myshala was laid to rest on January 24th in Sarasota. And behind all of this is the person whose life has now been permanently altered in the quietest, deepest way: her 6-year-old son. Because in stories like this, there is always the headline, and then there is the lifelong aftermath. This case is horrifying because it happened in broad daylight, at work, in a place that should have felt routine and safe. But it's also horrifying because it reflects something bigger: the danger that can come when one person sees another human being not as a person with freedom, but as something they own. Myshala Burnham should still be here. She should still be raising her son, still showing up to work, still living the life she was trying to build. Instead, her name became part of a story she never asked to be in. And Summer Freitag is still carrying the physical and emotional consequences of surviving a nightmare she never chose. So let this one sit with you, because this wasn't just a shooting. This was punishment disguised as heartbreak, control disguised as love, and evil showing up in the middle of an ordinary day. Stay locked in. This is Story Time. Real stories only. If this story moved you, leave a comment for Myshala Burnham and for Summer Freitag's recovery. And if you want more real cases told with depth, respect, and truth, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one.
Family says this Bradenton mom was always smiling.
The last time I spoke to her was at 12:51.
So like that Thursday.
On Thursday.
Yeah.
And it happened either right then or shortly after.
That phone call, now a timestamp, marks the last moment Brianna Fisher spoke with her sister, 29-year-old Myshala Burnham. Bradenton police say Burnham was shot and killed inside a medical lab where she worked. Investigators say the gunman was her ex-boyfriend, a reality her family says they don't immediately process. Police work to piece together what happened. Her sister says she was left trying to hold on to who Myshala was and not just how she died.
Like her name is spelled Myshala. She was my Shayla.
A name, a person, and a presence, she says, filled every room.
And that's the end of the video. If this video kept you locked in, make sure you like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Your support helps bring more real stories to the channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you're the first to know when a new story drops. We post real stories 3 times a week. Until the next one, stay locked in. Real stories only. This is Story Time.